In today's lecture, we'll talk about GDP growth rate. Now, in popular media and in newspapers or in business newspapers, often you hear that economists or policymakers talk about GDP growth rate and not actual GDP. Now, what does it mean? What is GDP growth rate? To understand these things, first let's try to understand let's focus on an article. The article appeared on April 27, 2018 in New York Times. The article says that US economy grew by 2.3% in first quarter, easing slightly. So let's get into the article. The economy grew at an annual rate of 2.3% in the first quarter, the government reported Friday, offering preliminary glance at how last year's sweeping package of tax cuts is affecting consumers and businesses this year. During the first 3 months of 2018, the economy was whacked around like a pinball. The stock market took investors on a giddy up and down ride. President Trump imposed tariffs on allies and rivals alike, stoking fears of a trade war. And the revamped tax code shifted business incentives and started to put more money in workers' paychecks. Still, the economy ended up puttering along just a bit above the average yearly growth rate that it had registered since the recession ended nearly 9 years ago. While the pace is equal to the performance for all of last year, it is below the 2.9% annualized rate recorded in the fourth quarter of 2017 and short of Mr. Trump's goal of at least 3%. Most forecasters, however, expect quarterly growth to float around the 3% mark for the rest of the year. Now we are talking about a lot of numbers. Numbers like 2.3%, 2.9%, 3%. What does it mean? What is GDP growth rate and why do economists or policymakers do focus on GDP growth rate? To understand this, let me first show you some numbers based on the GDP growth rate for the US. Now what you see here is a graph of GDP growth rate, annualized graph for the year from 1930s till today. And you can see GDP growth rate varies a lot. Some years we have expecting huge increase in GDP growth rate, some years huge decrease in GDP growth rate. Now if this is a 0 mark, and if it's below, that means GDP growth rate negative, that means our GDP is declining. Now typically you can see this is not a big number, it's kind of hovers around 2 to 3% in the last 20 years. Achieving a 3% growth rate in an economy like US is highly commendable. Achieving a 5% desirable, but is very difficult, and we'll talk about later why it is very difficult to grow at a 5% rate. Now what is growth rate? What does it mean? Now GDP growth rate is the percentage change in GDP. Now earlier we learned how to get GDP numbers or actual GDP. So all you have to do, find the percentage change. And how do you calculate percentage change or growth rate? You take the current GDP, you subtract from it the previous year's GDP, divided by previous year's GDP times 100. That will give you the growth rate. Now in reality, we do care more about the growth rate because it talks about the health of the economy. If the GDP growth rate is higher, which typically means that we are doing better, which also means that typically our income is also going up. So let's try to do some concrete examples. What given here is nominal GDP and real GDP for the year 2015, 16 and 17. Again, this data is collected from Bureau of Economic Analysis website that I showed you before. To calculate growth rate between 2015 and 2016, so GDP you have to bring in current GDP. So in 2016, GDP was 18,624.5. From it, you subtract the previous year's GDP in 2015, which was 18,120.7, and you divide it by the previous year GDP, 18,120.7, and you multiply the whole thing by 100. And what you get is the GDP growth rate between 2015 and 2016. So between 2015 and 16, US nominal GDP grew by 2.78%. That means compared to the previous year, the following year, GDP was up by 2.78%. Mind you, this is nominal GDP. Let's look at how much is the growth in real GDP. So real GDP grew by, in the same time period, 1.49%. Let's do the same thing for 2017. So we can calculate GDP growth rate between 2016 and 17. So in 2017, GDP grew by 4.11% compared to 2016, whereas real GDP increased by 2.27% compared to 2016. Now, a couple of clarifications. First of all, in this data, you cannot calculate 2015 growth rate because I have not given you data on 2014 GDP. However, you can easily collect those 2014 data from BEA website, which I have shown you before. Another noticeable thing is this, that nominal GDP growth rate is substantially higher than real GDP growth. And there's a reason behind it. Now, if you remember the definition of nominal GDP does not account for the price change, which means that GDP can increase because of two factors. One is increase in production of goods and services, also because of increase in prices. Since over time prices typically go up, so when you look at the growth rate in real nominal GDP, nominal GDP is typically higher than real GDP because nominal GDP growth rate also include increase in prices. However, real GDP, we adjust for inflation. Since we adjust for inflation in real GDP, we keep prices constant. So there's no price changes in real GDP. As a result, real GDP is lower than the nominal GDP. So let me write it down. Typically, real GDP growth rate